For the most part, we are preoccupied with being our personality, preoccupied with the roles we play in the world: mother, father, sister, brother, husband, wife, and the roles you play in your job, whatever your job is, right? And so we're preoccupied with being a personality, and we're preoccupied with being that personality, interacting with life and interacting with the world. And because of our preoccupation with the personality, and because of our preoccupation with thinking, we are in a state of ignorance. It's called ignorance. And it's not meant to be demeaning, it's meant to simply describe the fact that if you're ignoring the awareness that is the true self, is the true you, the real you, then you're being ignorant, and that ignorance has a price. That ignorance means that you will be limited as a personality. You will suffer unnecessarily because of that limitation, and suffer unnecessarily because of a preoccupation with thinking, which generates worry and rumination about the past and the future, and it's fear-based. So meditation is really the practice of shifting your orientation from being a personality that's preoccupied with thinking and playing roles and expressing your conditioning in the world. And when you practice meditation, we're practicing shifting from that over to being the awareness that is aware of the body breathing. And when we're paying attention to the breath and we're being the awareness aware of the body breathing, we're practicing being ourselves. We're practicing being the awareness. If there's no thinking happening there, the personality can't be generated, because the personality is produced by the thinking activity. If I ask the average person who they are, I hope if I ask some of you who you are, it's not still giving me the same answer. But if you ask the average person who they are, they tell you what they think, don't they? If I ask you who you are, you're going to tell me what you think. You're going to tell me who you think you are, right? Meditation is about discovering that that's not true. Discovering that there is an awareness that is always here, has always been here, and that's the truth, that's your actual nature. So when you practice meditation, it's important to understand this so that you get the full benefit of the practice. And it's important to understand that this practice is a practice that needs to happen consistently so that you can gradually come out of this orientation as a physical body and a personality. And it will happen gradually, because you've been practicing being a personality and a physical body as long as you've been alive, right? And so to practice something other than that, that's intended to cause a shift, to take over that, to have who you are be authentic, to have who you are be the truth of who you are, it's going to take time and practice to come out of that dream, to come out of that mental state, to come out of that understanding that you're a personality. And so it takes patience and it takes persistence. And practicing meditation, especially in the beginning, is not an easy thing. Most people fail. Most people fail. They can't maintain it because it requires that you sit still and shut up. That's enough for a lot of people not to practice, right? Because we live in a world where everybody thinks what they have to say is so important, right? So so to sit still and be quiet and to practice focusing your attention, in the beginning it will bring up a lot of restlessness because the body doesn't want to sit still, it wants to move. And it will bring up a lot of restlessness because the mind doesn't want to be still, it wants to move, it wants to think. But if you persist in time, gradually the mind begins to calm down. And as the mind calms down, you begin to take the reins. As the mind calms down, you begin to take over instead of the mind. This is very important because most people don't know that their mind is running their life. Most people don't know that what you think is running your life. The thought process is the voice of the mind. It's not your voice, it's the voice of the mind. And the mind has a predisposition to seek pleasure and avoid pain. So if you think you're your mind, that's what you do. You seek pleasure and avoid pain. The mind's very anxious. The mind is always looking to the future, trying to escape from the present because the present is never good enough. The mind's judging and evaluating everything all the time. Part of the process of practicing meditation is to become aware of your attention so that you can begin to intentionally and consciously use your attention to watch the mind and become a watcher, a mind watcher. To become a witness means to watch the mind, to watch what's happening in your experience, to watch the thought process, to watch the emotions, to watch the physical sensations. And as you practice watching these things, you're practicing being awake. You're practicing being awake. Because before you knew how to direct your attention, and you were only automatically paying attention consistently to what the thought process was providing, you were missing a lot. You know, in the traditions they call it sleep. You were missing a lot because you were living your life in your head. You were living your life as a thinking activity instead of being present to what's going on around you in the world. And there's a very high price for that. It's the source of suffering, because when you identify with the mind's never satisfied. Therefore, you're never satisfied. Right? Meditation is a way of being, not a technique. You know, it's basically understood to be a technique, right? But in the way that we're talking about it, you're practicing a way of being. You're practicing being the way you are when you meditate all the time. In other words, you're practicing being awake. You're practicing being aware of what's going on in the thinking activity. And through practicing that, you can eventually get to the point where you can direct your attention away from the crazy mind, away from the crazy thinking activity, so that you can get some peace. And it's a way of being. So over time, if you practice formal meditation, eventually you can start doing this in your everyday life while you're involved in the activities, to be awake and pay attention to what's going on so you can begin to relieve yourself of the suffering that occurs when the only way you have to relate to life is to think. Meditation is not about trying to get anywhere else. This is why Ram Dass, many, many years ago, wrote a book called Be Here Now, right? Because in meditation, we're practicing, experiencing being where we are right now, instead of being somewhere in the past or somewhere in the future. And the reason we're practicing that is because what's happening right now is reality. If you leave this, you leave reality. And if you leave reality, you're going to start having problems. It is about allowing yourself to be exactly where you are and as you are, and for the world to be exactly as it is in this moment as well. More than anything else, I have come to see meditation as an act of love, a gesture of the heart that recognizes our perfection even in our obvious imperfection. Awareness itself is the teacher, the student, and the lesson. Resting in awareness in any moment involves giving ourselves over to all our senses, in touch with inner and outer landscapes as one seamless whole. So if you persist, if you practice this, and if you learn, if you study the teachings, and if you develop understandings, right, the time will come when the way you are with life is that you're in a flow with life, that you allow everything to be as it is, including you, including the way you are emotionally, including your personality, including your past, including your body, including the whole 9 yards. Allow everything to be the way it is. One of my favorite sayings, and I have to say I originated this saying, is if whatever you let be will let you be. If you let everything be, then you're free to be. You're liberated. You're free to be, you know. You're no longer attached to the idea that things have to be a particular way for you to be okay. Okay. And the source of suffering, that's very important for us to stay aware of as we do the practices, because the practices are intended to bring us out of suffering. The source of suffering is the constant overlay of thinking, and the constant overlay of thinking is always judging and evaluating and deciding that the way it is shouldn't be this way. Okay? So whenever you reject the way it is, whether the way you are, the way somebody else is, the way life is, the way the government is, whenever you reject the way it is, you are in conflict with it. You're in conflict with it. If you reject the way it is, then you're struggling against it. You're trying to keep it away from you. You see, you're trying to make it change. And people spend their entire lifetimes in that activity, all the while suffering, and in the end failing, because you can't possibly change anything, really. That's an illusion. It's tricky because it appears that change can happen. In fact, the only thing that is happening is change, right? One of the primary teachings in a lot of the Eastern traditions is the teaching of impermanence. What's that mean? It means everything's changing all the time. So the only constant is change, right? So it's not about changing anything, no. It's about discovering your ability to be present to the way it is in such a way that it changes in the direction you would like it to. Well, if you pay attention to the way it is and you're practicing letting go, if you're practicing letting it be that way, remember, right? If you're practicing letting you be the way you are, letting Putin be the way he is, letting your neighbors be the way you are, letting the world be the way the world is, let the room be the way the room is. If you practice that, right, what you're practicing is bringing your awareness to the way it is without struggling with it, without trying to change it, without doing anything with it other than be present to it and allow the light of your awareness to shine on it. And when you pay attention to something that's not consistent with the truth, it changes. When you pay attention to something that's not consistent with the truth, it changes. So you don't have to change it. It's already changing. What you want to do is have some say-so about how it changes. Not whether it changes. Well, it'll always change. Everything's changing all the time. You can't control that. You can't stop that. But when you pay attention to something that is not working, in the light of awareness, whatever it is that's not consistent with the truth will begin naturally to change to become consistent with the truth, simply by paying attention. You can apply this. I mean, one of the things I've said here in the past is that if you're a true practitioner of meditation and you're studying the teachings, if you really are doing that the way it's meant to be done consistently every single day, spending some time every single day listening to a teaching, reading a book, contemplating these teachings, right? If you do that consistently over time, what will happen is your consciousness will change. Your consciousness will change. And those of you who have been coming to this class for a while now have probably noticed that, that the way it is not the same. The way it is starts to be different for you. And you start to be able to be more conscious of your thought process, more conscious of your emotions. And because of that, you can begin to intervene. This whole practice and these teachings can be psychotherapeutic. Because of the increase in awareness, you can begin to intervene. What's that mean? It means that when you get upset, when you get angry, I'll use anger because that's a problem for most people, right? When you get upset, when you get angry, right, and those thoughts start to go off in your mind, and you start to feel it in your body, right, the fight, flight, or freeze, right? Because of the practice of awareness, because of the practice of meditation, you now will be more aware of that than you ever were. And because you're more aware of that than you ever were, you will also be aware of how crazy it is. You will notice crazy thoughts when they're crazy, instead of identifying with them. You see, if you're identifying with them, then you become as crazy as your thinking is. And you behave as crazy as your thinking is, right? And then you end up coming to me. I'm a psychologist. So this is a way out. This is a way out of that problem, you know, that if you pay attention, you can begin to watch the thinking activity and see that it's preoccupied with the past and the future, and see that it's afraid, and see that it keeps trying to control everything, right? It's seeking pleasure and avoiding pain. You can watch all this, right? And when it gets crazy, right, because you're aware of it and you can recognize the craziness, right, you can intervene in such a way where it doesn't end up coming out of your mouth. You can intervene in such a way where you don't act it out, right? So in this process, if that's occurring, if you're doing the work, if you're doing the practice correctly, that will mean your relationships will improve because you'll stop being an asshole. Well, no, you'll still be an asshole, but it won't be so obvious because you won't act like one. You'll just know you are inside. You know, you'll watch the asshole thought process instead of being the asshole person. Much better life, right? You'll have a much better life if you keep your assholeness to yourself. And then, of course, the other part of this is to, even with that, you know, to just accept that that's just the nature of your mind. That's all. You don't have to, you know, when I say you're an asshole, I mean that your personality that is driven by your mind and your thought processes cause you to think asshole thoughts. And if that doesn't get dealt with, it'll end up in asshole feelings and asshole behaviors and an asshole life. Right? And then life gets uncomfortable because your relationships don't work, right? You're anxious all the time, or you get depressed, right? You end up on prescriptions, right? So this is a way out. This is a way of going sane. This is a way of coming to an understanding that unless you wake up, unless you see things as they really are, including yourself, including your mind, your life will be another version of the ordinary life that people live that includes a lot of suffering and ends in death. So another way to talk about this is to say, by developing our ability to be present and to see things as they are, we will be more resilient. The brain scientists are telling us that resilience is one of the products of the practice of meditation. Resilience. What's resilience? Resilience means that when something happens, you'll be a lot more able to be with it and not have it freak you out. And when something happens, you'll be able to let it go much sooner. If you have an upset, you'll be able to let it go much sooner. You won't keep thinking about it in your mind over and over again, which is the way a lot of people live their lives. Okay. So resilience is a big deal. If you can really be resilient, so that you can let go of the situations that occur that are inevitable. You know, it's inevitable in life that we're going to be challenged. It's inevitable in life that you're going to get pissed off. It's inevitable in life that you're going to feel the need to compulsively try and control things, or compulsively try and change things, or at least tell the people around you how wrong they are. Right? So when you discover what it's like to be awake, you discover that life works. There is no problem in life. There is no problem in life. If you start to be with life the way life is, there's no problem. The problems that people have in life are a function of the way they think about what's happening, not what's happening. And the evidence of that is clear, because if I had a monk, you know, one of the monks that was being studied in brain science, you know, has been meditating for decades, right? So if I had that monk here, and he was sitting in one chair and you were sitting in the other chair, right? And we did some exercises in terms of testing, you know, how you respond to different kinds of stimuli, right? There'd be a major difference with the monk. You know, the monk would be able to let go of experiences immediately, right? Where every time we did a little test to see how you were dealing with different stimuli, the monk would be able to let go of the situation immediately and return back to a base level of being relaxed and open. where you and I, because of the fact that we haven't had all those years and decades of practice, would probably not be able to respond as effectively as the monk. And then when we fail to respond, we wouldn't be able to stop thinking about it. Right? If you're going to be a major baseball player, one of the things the coaches know they have to teach you is that when you're up at bats and you strike out, right, leave the strikeout at the home plate. Don't take it back to the dugout. If you do, you won't be able to hit the ball in the future. That's the same way with our lives. You know, whatever's happening in your life, if you can't let it go and move on, right, then you're going to be less and less functional, less and less able to deal with life effectively, right? Because you're going to be more and more upset until you can't leave your house or until you can't leave your bed, right? That's what happens for people. And we have to be realistic about life, you know? You have to be realistic about life in terms of the fact that, as the Buddha said, the suffering that is going to occur in all of our lives may be different day to day, but will be the same generally in the sense that we're all going to get old, right? And we're all going to get sick and we're all going to die. Nobody escapes that, right? But because we are aware of that and we know that, we can practice meditation and develop an experience of ourselves as the awareness that we are, which is the real you, right? Which is not physical. And because it's not physical, it can't die. And if you establish yourself as that, then when the time comes, when the body ages and you know you're not the body, and the body gets sick, right, and you know you're not the body, and death comes and you know you're not the body, then those things will be manageable, completely manageable. That's the difference between somebody who has taken on the responsibility for learning about the truth and practicing meditation and preparing for the inevitables, right? Those inevitables are coming, and for us, you know, in this room, you guys are the young ones tonight, but for us in this room, that's relative now. It's important now because it's not that far away. Now, so then your mind will take that and say, yeah, it's not that far away, but it's not today. It's not this week. It's not this year, right? I love it when I talk to people about age. And now, because of the fact that people live to be 100, everybody I talk to about age says, well, I'm in my 70s, you know, but I got a good 25, 30 years left. What the hell is that? They don't realize that 100 years is the exception, not the rule. The rule is still in the late 70s, early 80s, right? So you ought not to fool yourself about the truth, right? But the fact is, if you study these things and you practice these things and you do make the transition from the idea you have about yourself to the reality of yourself, when these inevitable things come, you'll be prepared. In the meantime, although your mind may say, oh yeah, but that's tomorrow, that's next year, that's in 5 years. Okay, even if it is, the truth be told, anything can happen anytime. Right? So it's naive, even stupid, to live your life as if it's not going to happen to you, you know? That's one of the things people get out of watching the news at night, because they can sit there and say, that didn't happen to me, right? I'm not in the Ukraine, right? I didn't just get shot in Philadelphia, somebody else did, right? That's a naive way to think, right? Because it could happen to you anytime. There are any number. It's actually amazing that there aren't more car accidents. You know, nobody thinks they're going to have a heart attack. Nobody thinks they're going to have a stroke. Nobody thinks they're going to be in a serious car accident. Nobody thinks they're going to get shot. Nobody thinks that. Because you have no control, but not having control is only a problem when the way you can see it, the way you can think of yourself, what you consider yourself to be, needs control. It does, doesn't it? Yeah, if you consider yourself to be a physical body, living in time, separate from the world, separate from everybody else, you need control, okay? So that is the reason why there's a lot of suffering going on, because you just can't control everything. Actually, you can't control anything, right? But if you succeed in the transition from the experience of yourself as a physical body and a personality, if you succeed in the transition from that to being what you actually are as awareness, then you don't need any control. Then you don't need any control, right? Because the awareness that you really are is like the space in this room. I often say that, but the metaphor is so perfect. The awareness that you are is like the space in this room. Does the space in this room need control? Has it asked us to leave? No, it doesn't care. The space in this room is like awareness. It's exactly like awareness. Anything that happens here can happen without any resistance. No resistance at all. Right? Space doesn't need control. Awareness doesn't need control. Awareness can be with life. Awareness can be with sickness. Awareness can be with death. It's not threatened by any of that. I was listening to Rupert Spira today interact with a woman about death, right? Because that's the big, scary thing, right? Death. And she was asking him to give her his opinion about what happens after death. And he did the right thing, right? He said, I can't speculate on that. And then he said something important. He said, but if I did tell you the answer to that, it would be a lollipop you'd put in your mouth to make you feel better about how scared you are of dying. Pretty good, right? And then he said to her, if you want to deal with the fear of death, right, then focus your intention and focus your practice and focus your understanding, right, on dropping into your true nature, dropping into the reality of what you are as awareness itself. That will resolve your fear of death. To the degree that you experience your true nature as awareness, it doesn't make any sense to be afraid. What can happen to you? If it's true that you and I are awareness itself, nothing can happen to us. This is important, because if it's true that you and I are the awareness itself and nothing can happen to us, then all of our worrying, all of our struggling is a waste of energy. It's not going to matter. It's not going to make any difference. Right? So that's why these teachings and practices and these understandings are so important and so powerful, because they can take you out of the experience of being threatened. They can take you out of that and allow you to be present in life in a way that you can relax and enjoy the ride, enjoy the experience. That's the tragedy. The tragedy for most human beings is that the body is born and the body dies, and they are born and become a personality, and that personality dies with the body, and that's the end. And the entire time they were living a life that was a thinking activity. They were living a life that was a thinking activity. And so in the end, the question is, you know, a lot of people spend a lot of time worrying about trying to come to a conclusion about what's the purpose of life, like that stuff, right? Yeah. What if the answer to that is obvious? What if the answer to that is the purpose of life is to live life? What is that saying that they use in science to say the most obvious answer is probably the right one? You don't know that? It's Occam's razor or something. There's some name of that, right? But what if it is the case that the purpose of life is to live life? Well, that eliminates most of humanity, right? Because most of humanity is not living life. They're living a story that they keep telling in their head about life, not life, right? So if the purpose of life is to live life, and if it's true that if you live life, you can enjoy life and be happy, so that the time you have here, which is very limited, right? Life is very brief. You know, as you get older, we all know how brief life is, right? Yeah. Right? Life is very brief. So you don't want to waste your time. You don't want to waste your time being crazy. No. You want to spend your time coming out of the identification with the personality and the body, so you can get freed up, so you can be liberated enough to be here and enjoy the experience of being alive. That's the tragedy, is most people never experience being alive. That's why one of the things they talk about in these teachings and practices is that as you move out of the mental state, as you move out of the conceptual understanding about who you are and what life is, right? You experience more aliveness, more energy, more vitality, more interest, more excitement, more involvement. And this will take its natural course, right? it will take its natural course. You don't have to try and control your dirty habits anymore. You don't have to try and control your addictions anymore. If you stay committed to this path, those things will clear up naturally. They'll clear up naturally because it's just part of what it is to be awake. And the same thing will happen with your body. If you continue to do this work and you persist in these practices, right, your body will change. Your body will start to change. Your relationship to your body will start to change. You will be naturally interested in taking care of your body. You'll be willing to deal with the challenges that we all face, not to keep eating the garbage that we're presented with. You know, you'll start to realize that it doesn't make any sense to keep putting that garbage in your mouth. Right? And you'll start to get interested in what health looks like. What does it mean to be healthy physically? Not just physically, but emotionally and mentally. And that'll all be natural. That'll all happen naturally because that's the natural expression of being awake. It's as simple as that. So here's what I want to leave you with. And I said this to you before, and I'm talking to you people here, but I'm also talking to everybody out there in YouTube land, right? If you're interested in these practices and these teachings, at some point you have to ask yourself a very important question. Am I committed? Am I committed to this? Or is this something that I just find to be interesting and, you know, I'll give it a try, you know, or once in a while I'll read a book about it, or I'll practice meditation once in a while. That's not going to get you much at all. It might help to reduce stress, but it's not going to get you anywhere at all in terms of waking up. So it's important for you to ask yourself that question, am I committed? And if the answer is yes, then how is that commitment going to be expressed? If it's yes, then you'll be meditating every day. If it's yes, then you'll spend time every day reading or listening to a teacher talk or contemplating the truth. And if it's yes and you don't do those things, you're lying. And so, at some point, it's important to come to terms with yourself about whether you're full of shit. It is, isn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, how much, you know, at some point you have to stop bullshitting yourself about things and start to make contact with the truth. And it may not be pleasant in the beginning, you know, to face the truth about who you are and how you've been living your life. But that's what it takes to start out in reality, grounded in reality, so that you can start to move toward the possibility.